Welcome back, viewers. You're still here in Scope with me, Waqar Rizvi. Now, in the final segment of today's show, we're going to discuss France, and we've discussed overall Islamophobia and the way France treats its own Muslim citizens for a while now here on this program. We're going to talk now about the French Senate's vote to ban anyone under the age of 18 from wearing the hijab, which has generated a lot of backlash. And that's not the only such measure that's included in the separatism bill that is currently under discussion and that may pass in the National Assembly as well. There's also other measures, such as the fact that women in hijab may not be able to accompany their children on school trips as well. And these are, of course, just a few of the measures that can be discussed overall, which are disturbing within the separatism bill altogether, which in many regards does, in fact, target Muslim citizens of France overall. Let's discuss those issues a bit further. We're now joined by Hamid Shriat, who is a political commentator, columnist, and journalist. He's joining us today from Paris. Joining us from Boston, Massachusetts, is Dr. Jocelyne Cesari, who is a professor of religion and politics at the University of Birmingham. She's also a visiting professor at the Harvard Divinity School. Jocelyne and Hamid, thank you both for taking your time out to join us today. Jocelyne, let me start with you. What do you make of the way that and the direction in which France has been moving recently, and now these details that have come out of the separatism bill regarding hijab?
So this is really worrisome, but at the same time, it is part of this ongoing suspicion of the French vis-à-vis Islamic signs of religiosity in the public space. And, you know, the debate on the hijab started in 1989 and never really stopped, to the point that you have this law of 2004 that prohibits religious signs, but we know that it was targeting and still targeting the hijab primarily, and the prohibition was in public schools. But since 2004, there have been a continuous push to also limit the dress code, Islamic dress code, in other public space. There were stories of mothers going with their children to get married in the city hall and being barred from entering the city hall because they were wearing the hijab. So the situation is very worrisome because it's a continuous erosion of religious freedom. And there are two major reasons for that. The first one, I would say the more deep down ingrained, is the suspicion and I would say fear of the French vis-à-vis the visibility of all religions. And for Muslims, they have a second issue, which is most of the piety or signs of Islamic piety are unfortunately associated with international battles of violence. And this is something that is also increasing the fear of Islam. So in other words, you have the extreme French secularism or laïcité that has pushed back outside the public space all signs of religion. Everybody has been concerned in this regard, but you add to that the fact that for Islam, all these signs are also signs of uncivism and even more insecurity. That's what I've called the securitization of Islam. Yeah. And we are right in it. And when I left France a few years back or 2 decades back, I said, this is not going to end, and this has been going on and on. So this is really, really worrisome, and it's very hard on all Muslims, even if they don't wear the hijab, actually.
Indeed. What are your thoughts on this? Because as Jocelyne there said, it's not necessarily just about the women who choose to wear the hijab or not, right? I mean, this is an all-out almost targeting, right, of minorities, especially Muslims.
As you previously mentioned in your introduction, Macron government is assuming that all Muslim women in headscarves are oppressed and ignorant. The women, the French Muslim women, cannot be empowered by taking away their autonomy and free will and the right to choose. And I believe that this step is very dangerous. The Islamophobia in France started after September 11, when the United Nations have been attacked, as we know altogether. So I believe that this step is dangerous, and it gives a very bad message to the Muslim world France's relationship with the veil has been fractious for a while now. As you know, the lasted drive to ban the hijab for everyone under the age of 18, part of, as we mentioned, the law, the separatism bill, stems from a movement. And this is, as I said previously, have been growing in 1911. So in 9/11, sorry. So I believe that this law is targeting the Muslim women and taking their own right, and also is a symbol, a bill to ban religious symbol from schools. And I believe that today it's a very dangerous steps for the Muslim lords and also for the economic ties between France and the Muslim lords. I believe that today the French government is going to failure, and he doesn't have any proposal for the 2022. The stakes for the Emmanuel Macron is important. He wants to be re-elected for 2022. As you know, there is the next election in France, the next presidential election is in 2022. Macron, as a strategist, wants to be re-elected. He was the new candidate when he had been elected in 2022, in 2017. So this was a new phase for the French generation, and particularly the regeneration. So Macron has been facing now with many challenges in France, such as the economic crisis, such as his failure, his political.
Okay, so if I may come in, Hamid, you made some very good points there. Jocelyne, I wanted to put that to you because I wonder why now, as you've said, that the issue of hijab in France and religious symbols in public has been something that's been debated for quite a number of years now. So why choose in the year 2021 to go down this route? Is it, as Hamid there mentioned, as many people have mentioned, that this is actually all politics more than actually talking about, you know, the freedoms and religious symbols that have been debated, that this is more about Macron realizing that, for example, the support for Le Pen and her party has grown significant enough that that's now a threat to him, and so he needs to be ever more right-wing as well?
Yeah, that's definitively part of the strategy, electoral strategy. But again, Macron doesn't do it on his, he's not the only one. The use of anti-Islamic rhetoric and measures have been done by all governments, right, left. That's the problem here. Even if there were no election, there would be a continuous suspicion and discourse against Islam. Of course, it's easy to use it electorally, because all pollings and surveys show that the French consider Islam as a threat. So it's very, very easy when you do not have results in other areas like economy or even the COVID crisis to take Islam as a way to create this kind of cohesion and consensus. But again, I'm not saying it's one element, but it's not the only one. Otherwise, you don't explain why for 20 years this has been going on. I mean, there is something here deep down, and that's why it's easy to use to intensify the fear, and the fear is to be addressed. Otherwise, we're going to keep on piling on this kind of restriction up to the point that we're going to have to question the democratic feature of France. I think this is really serious. I'm happy that finally the measure that is discussed on banning the hijab has created a protest, because until now there were very little protests. Except the Muslims, and they were never really heard. So I'm happy to see that for the first time, these extreme measures are creating some kind of popular reaction.
You know, on the topic of religious symbols, right? And I think we've discussed this before. Do you think that other people of different faiths also realize that it's a slippery slope, right? That today it's the hijab, but tomorrow it could be the Jewish skull cap. Tomorrow it could be the Sikh turban. You know, we could be talking about even Christian crosses, etc. I mean, all of those things could very well be threatened if they're not already threatened by such measures, right?
Yes, of course. As you said, I do agree. I believe that it's not about just also the Muslim women, about the hijab, but it's also about the whole minority, the religious symbol, and particularly for also the Jewish community and also the Christian, which, for example, wears a cross or the hijab as well, the veil. Some French Christians wear the hijabs. So, but I believe it is also important, and I would like to come back what he said previously, your guest. It is important to understand that such policies in France today are not recent phenomenon. Discrimination against Muslims, especially women, has been stately enforced in the name of the law and order and national integrity for some times. And also the most recent proposed ban is just another step to take away the Muslim, the French Muslim lady. We have a paradox in the speech of the Macron presidency. When Macron had said, when he delivered his speech, when he said that we wanted the Muslim community, he wanted that to be integrated, more integrated. But at the same time, he excluded the French Muslim community. And this is also rooted in the imperialistic legacy of France, where for part of 20th century, it occupied many Muslim majority historically, as you know, lands in Africa, in the Middle East, in the Arabic world. And during this period, I would like to say for our public audience that there was also a drive to separate Islamic symbol historically and also practices from the oppressed area by banning the veil and Arabic language. Don't remember, from the public sphere, the colonial mindset has continued in France. We've seen that and has been the roots of the blatant Islamophobia in the state. And that is why also, that is why today the mentality of the French government, and I believe today the Muslim community and the Muslim world has to take steps against this discrimination, particularly against the women who are discriminated. I salute the Prime Minister from Pakistan and also the President of Erdogan, and also other Muslim leaders that condemn the Macron attitude when he said that Islam is in crisis. So this is not something which is new in France.
Right.
It has been for a long time, and during also the colonial period in France.
Okay, so Jocelyne, we're quickly running out of time, so I wanted to give you the final word. Does this all, do you think, also make sense when we look at France's relationship with its own minorities overall? So I'm not just talking about the Muslims right now. I'm not talking about just people of different faiths as well, but just people of color as well, right? So we've had issues of, for example, darker skinned people, or if we're completely honest, black people within France and black citizens of France, and the way that they're treated by police. There have been a number of cases over these years as well. So do you think all of this put together then creates this one atmosphere that possibly minorities overall and the vision for them in France at this point in time doesn't look very positive?
Yes, that again, there are two elements in what you're saying. The first one is all statistics and surveys show that since 9/11, the French government and other European governments had increased discrimination against all religious minorities. But the Muslims come on top, because the Muslims are victims of two types of discrimination: governmental, and this is an example, but also social, when people are abusing Muslims in the social relations, while other minorities in France are mostly discriminated socially, but the government is trying to maintain some kind of equality or rule of law. So this is very hard for all Muslims. Socially, governmentally, there are continuous attacks. At the same time, why this focus on Muslims? Because they carry in France and across Europe other features that make them, I would say, that pain them negatively. One is indeed, as you say, the immigration question, the post-colonial origin, the fact that also in France they are seen as an ethnicity or race. Most of them come from North Africa. So even if you are not an observant young man from Algeria, you're going to get into trouble with the police. And because there is all this colonial and post-colonial perception, and also because they belong to, or they reside in very disenfranchised urban areas. So people have put this together. You are Muslim, so you are an immigrant, so we have problem with you. You are an ethnic and or racial minority, and you create problems in the ghettos and economic problems. And on top of that, now everything is defined in Islamic terms. That's the most dangerous thing that can happen. Nobody makes the difference anymore. So that plus indeed the I would say centuries of fear and suspicion of the French political culture against religion that goes back to the fact, and I will finish on that, to the fact that for the French, religion is problem because of the traumatic experience with the Catholic Church that always mingled with the state and was anti-democratic, anti-republic. And so the discourse has been transmitted from generation to generation. The Catholics have adjusted to that. It took them half a century, so it was not an easy thing. But the mentality is still there. The visibility of religion in public space is trouble. And when you add all these other features I just described, it creates this huge suspicion and I would say phobia in all aspects.
We'll leave it there at that, but we really appreciate both Jocelyne and Hamid for taking their time out of their busy schedules to speak to us this Friday, sharing their insight with us about